It's everyone's friend, it's Tyler. It's everyone's friend, it's Tyler.
Hey guys, Tyler here. Today I'm going to talk about Noah's Ark, perhaps one of the most fantastical stories in the Bible. Now before we talk about Noah's Ark, let's talk about the history behind the story, because prior to Noah's Ark, there were at least two stories that existed talking about a great flood in Mesopotamia. The first Mesopotamian flood story that exists prior to Noah's Ark was the Epic of Atrahasis. Now, the text is known from several versions, two of which were written by Assyrian scribes, one in the Assyrian, one in the Babylonian dialect. A third one was written on street tablets during the reign of King Ananabi of Babylonia in 1647 through 1626 BCE, and parts of it was quoted in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Here's a summary of the whole entire story. The condition immediately after the creation, the lower gods had to work really hard and start to complain. Revolt of the lower gods, negotiation with the great gods, proposal to create humans to relieve the lower gods from their labor, the creation of man, man's nosy behavior, new complaints from the gods, the supreme god, decision to extinguish mankind by a great flood. Atrahasis is warned in a dream. Enki explains a dream to Atrahasis and portrays the plan, the construction of the ark, and the boarding of the ark. Departure, the great flood. The gods are hungry because there are no farmers left to bring sacrifices, and decide to spare Atrahasis even though he is a rebel. Regulations to cut down the noise, childbirth, infant mortality, and celibacy. Another story that was influential to the creation of Noah's Ark was a story that is called the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, the Sumerian hero Gilgamesh traveled the world in search of a way to cheat death. On one of his journeys, he came across an old man who told Gilgamesh stories from centuries past. The gods brought a flood that swallowed the earth. The gods were angry at mankind, so they sent a flood to destroy him. The god warned Atmutans and instructed him to build an enormous boat to save himself, his family, and the seed of all living things. He does so, and the gods brought rain, which caused the water to rise for many days. When the rains subdued, the boat landed on a mountain, and Amutans set loose first a dove, then a shadow, and finally a raven, which found land. Because of information like this made me really doubt the authenticity of the Bible. Because honestly, if the Bible is getting influence from different tales that exist prior to the existence of the said story, the variation of the story, how much is it really the inspired word of God if God tend to use stories that existed prior to, of course, the Bible being there to exist in the first place? And so, of course, I never took the story to be literal, but at the same time, it kind of told me that much of the Bible is not really original, that much of the Bible is inspired from different stories in ancient Mesopotamia that existed before Genesis and the other kind of books that are included in the whole entire thing. And it came to pass, when man began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born among them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for he is also flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, with the sons of God, came upon the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were old men of renown. You know, a thought actually occurred to me while I was reading that passage right there. If 40% of Americans, like I noticed like the last episode, thought that creationism is true, they also believe that giants are also real. You know, in the film adaptation of Noah's Ark from Hollywood, there was actually, of course, giant rocks. And so, I'm kind of curious, do these people think that giant rocks are also real. Because honestly, that is just too ridiculous for me to actually handle. And God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination and the thoughts of his heart was only evil. And he repented the Lord that he made man on the earth, and he grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creepy thing, and the fowls of the air, but repenteth me that I made them. Now, according to the believers of the Bible, God is pretty much all-knowing and all-powerful. I mean, if God is all-knowing and all-powerful, like, he could probably, of course, just change the heart of man, just like that, and of course, everybody would cease to be evil. But no, he has to go out and genocide an entire group of people, because apparently he thought that they were too wicked. Now, the implication, this whole entire part right here, is that apparently, of course, the unborn are killed, women are killed, men are killed, pretty much everybody is killed because of that whole entire flood. And honestly, like I said earlier, if God is all-powerful, how come he cannot change the heart of men to not be evil? Like, why would he have to kill off the entirety of humanity because he was really upset about, of course, like, what happened with the man's of hearts? And also, it's like, people say in discussions that I have about this topic that apparently God is exception to the rule of course, like genocide because he's all powerful and because he's a god. But I'm sorry, if a shooter goes into a mall and just starts shooting up the people, we will hold that person accountable for shooting up the entire mall and, of course, the innocent people. Yet for some strange reason, some believers who believe that the Bible is literal think that God is actually higher than, of course, to be, of course, judged for his actions. Which is a ridiculous notion to me. Completely ridiculous. Noah's Ark, like with most stories in the Bible, suffers heavily from contradictions. Here's the first contradiction. And the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bare unto the ark, and it was lift above the earth. In Genesis 7:24 it states, the water prevails upon the earth for 150 days. So which is it? Is it 40 days for the flood or 150 days? Because both cannot be true at the same time. In Genesis 8:13 it says, it came to pass on the 600th day in first year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dry from off the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. However, in Genesis chapter 8:14 it states, in the second month, on the 7th and 20th day of the month, the earth was dried. In Genesis chapter 7, verse 7 through 11 it states, Noah went in, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him into the ark, because the water of the flood, of clean beasts and of beasts that were not clean, and of fowls and everything that creepeth upon the earth. There went in 2 and 2 upon Noah's in the ark, the male and the female, as God has commanded Noah. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth. And the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. Now for Genesis chapter 8, section 4, it says that the ark was on the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains. Not even the bird that comes out in Noah's ark is very consistent, because in Genesis chapter 8, verse 7, it is a raven. However, in Genesis chapter 8, verses 8 through 9, is a dove. So which is it? A raven, a dove, a raven, or a dove? Not only is Noah's Ark a humongous mess of just contradictions, but also there is like no such evidence of a Noah's Ark. In fact, there is like no evidence of a worldwide flood either. And Genesis chapter 7 verses 18 to 19 says, the water prevailed, and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. there's like no such evidence of a flood that cover entire mountaintops. Like, we know for a fact that yes, that floods that do in fact happen known to, of course, like to crush houses and buildings and whatnot, right? However, as far as a flood, to produce that much rain to cover a mountaintop, I never heard of such thing ever happening. Ever. And so this idea that it actually happened for real by the Bible literalists is completely insane to me. Now, according to Genesis 5:32, it says that Noah was about 500 years old when God told him to build the boats. However, in Genesis chapter 7 verse 6, it said by the time that Noah was done building the boat, he was like 600 years old. So it took at least 100 years for Noah to just build a boat. The whole entire story is just absurd if you just take it at face value. Because they said that Noah required 2 of each animal to get on the boat. And you're telling me that all the animals in the world can go to like a single ark and not actually fight each other? Because honest to God, it would be like amazing like if there's like no animals that were just fighting each other. Because of course we know for a fact that sometimes like the prey feed upon like little prey and vice versa. So it would be amazing to me if there was like no animals that did not try to kill each other on that freaking boat. There was also the fact that of course that some animals never existed apparently in the Bible, but we actually know for a fact that they did in fact existed. Let's take for example the kangaroo. Now the Bible never mentioned about the kangaroo, but we now know that there are kangaroos in Australia. So you mean to tell me that a freaking kangaroo jumped all the way from Australia to Mesopotamia just to get on a freaking boat? It's so freaking like, ridiculous. But like I said earlier, at least 40% of Americans believe that this story is true, and that's why I'm reviewing it in a very literal way, because 40% of Americans actually think it's literal. So what can we conclude from all of this? For starters, of course, Noah's Ark is not original. It was borrowed text from other stories. We know for a fact that, of course, the science stuff for Noah's Ark is like practically impossible. We know for a fact that Noah did not actually exist. There was like no sort of ark whatsoever. And so the idea to believe that Noah's Ark is literal is complete absurdity. Absolute absurdity. But what do you guys think? Tell me in the comment section down below. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.
It's everyone's friend, it's Tyler. He's your only black friend, so he's your best black friend. I wouldn't trade him for another black friend, because black friends are rare, as you should be aware. He smiles like Richard Pryor, so just sit and stare. It's everyone's friend, it's Tyler. It's everyone's friend, it's Tyler. It's everyone's friend, it's Tyler.